Well, welcome back, everybody, and we'll continue with our webinar event. I would like to introduce Chris Smith from Perennial Freight, who's going to talk to us in relation to views from a licensed haulage operator. So, Chris, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Owen, and thank you for having me today. And hopefully, for the next few minutes, I can give you a little bit of a background in what's going on in the freight industry and what's been happening over the last couple of months and what our plans are for the future. I suppose starting off, in transport, in haulage, we see the first and last of everything. We see recessions, when they come first, and we see the end of them as well. We're always a very good barometer of what happens in Ireland and in Europe in relation to the uplift in business and the economy. So we're always a good gauge of what's happening. I'm going to run down through the points in the 10-year strategy, starting off with the Irish haulage fleet and why we have 45% of the fleet that's 10 years old. Probably the biggest reason of that is because we're an island nation and we don't have like the European counterparts have. They can connect, they can move trucks and trailers across different economies, so they can have good trade-ins, they can get better deals than we can get over here. 45% of your fleet at 10 years old, it's surprising me, but doesn't surprise me, because most people will buy a truck in Ireland and they finance it over 60 months, then they keep it for another 5 years free of charge and maintain it. But in Europe, you can go and get a truck for probably €1,000 a month. You trade it back in after 3 years. It's got bumper to bumper warranty. You get serviced anywhere in Europe you want. So there's a lot more flexibility and a lot more choice out there. And certainly we don't have that same choice here in Ireland. If you look at the fleet, we have a fleet here. We try to trade it in as much as we can. We try to maintain it and do our best. But again, pricing is a big thing. A brand new truck in Ireland is €85,000, and at the end of maybe 10 years, it could be worth anything from 10 to 5,000 euros. So it is an expensive hobby, keeping trucks. It is an expensive, job trying to maintain them and service them, but that's life. That's what we have to do. If you look at some of the multiples here in Ireland, I suppose that always gives me I look at it and see who has their own fleets in Ireland. Probably the only fleet I know is Musgraves, and they have got all these daft trucks, which are day cabs. The rest of the multiples all use third party subcontraction. And most of them are owner drivers. They've got 1 or 2 trucks, and they're maintaining, they're servicing, and so forth. And that explains why we're not able to go and trade these trucks every 3 or 4 years and do the deals that the European colleagues can do. So it's quite difficult, in Ireland to actually go in and do kind of a PCP finance deal that you could do in a car in a garage. That's just not possible here. Very possible in the UK, very possible in Europe, because much more choice and certainly much more, I suppose, options out there for the kind of deals you'd want to do. So the trucking fleet, it is old, and it's probably going to remain old for a number of years now, unless we get somebody enters the market with a very, very good option and proposal for us. In relation to COVID and Brexit, I suppose in relation to COVID, that was the big thing for the haulage industry. I think the haulage industry reacted very, very well when COVID came in last March. I think the HGV driver, he was actually deemed an essential driver, but to me, he was really a frontline driver, because they were just one line down below, doctors and nurses, because they were the guys on the roads at nighttime, in the early mornings, in the late nights, trying to get deliveries done to supermarkets and factories. I mean, when people were panicking over toilet rolls, getting them into Ireland, we were laughing, going, what's the problem? We can load toilet rolls in South Wales on a Monday afternoon. We can ship it Monday night. We can have it in Dublin on Tuesday morning first thing. What's the big panic? We all knew that was not an issue, because we do that every single day. That's the job we're in. So drivers, they were really the heroes for me in the haulage industry when COVID came. I remember the night when the Taoiseach actually spoke on the news with the first lockdown, and he told us all that the country went into lockdown and we'd have to from Monday morning, basically our life would change. I drove down to the office here on the Saturday morning, and I came in and I was full of pride, because everybody, all this operations team had come in, didn't ask them, every single one of them reacted and came in the door. They were here because they knew we're in transport, we're in haulage. We have to go and do the job here. We have to ring customers in Ireland and UK and Europe. We have to rebook loads. We have to see what they want to do. I didn't ask them to come in, but they were here. And it just showed to me, the flexibility, and the goodness that's in the transport haulage, and within the operations team, with the drivers, they were all there. they were here to help and sort the problem out. So really they were solutions providers. Our office was like the New York Stock Exchange that Saturday morning, phones ringing, trying to rebook, trying to get things done. And it wasn't because, you know, we wanted for our own company, it was because we wanted to help the customers. We needed to get those deliveries done, get those collections done. It was kind of ironic, and I looked on the television and I saw the pilots being paraded from Aer Lingus, you know, for bringing PPE gear back in from China. And I was kind of thinking to myself the same night, I have truck drivers on laybys in Ireland now trying to get some sleep. They can't go into garages because all the canteens are closed. There's no toilet facilities in factories because they weren't allowed to go in there. Just felt maybe, you know, there wasn't enough recognition given to the drivers, you know, and the hard work that they had done. Certainly, I think the drivers stood up very well within COVID, and they've done their very best, and things got better and better, and they were given a little bit more kind of, I suppose, respect is what was given. Brexit then came along, and you know, Brexit was our next challenge, and we've been preparing for years in Brexit. We've been working hard to try train drivers up, train staff up, get our heads around customs clearance. We didn't know what was going to happen because a lot of the systems that Brexit were going to bring in could not be tested prior to the 31st of December. So really on the 1st of January, it was just do our very, very best here. We opened up our own customs team because we just couldn't get, you know, experienced staff out there. And I suppose it was frustrating. It was a difficult time in January and February, but we got through it. And now if you look at the UK volumes, we're back to more near normal than what we were pre-Brexit. I suppose one of the frustrating things for us in transport was the blame game that went on, that the transport companies and the customs clearance guys were being blamed for some of the holdups and delays at ports because we weren't properly prepared, or we weren't properly, you know, got our systems in place. That wasn't true, really, to be fair, because I think we didn't have the chance, we didn't have the opportunity to test out some of the systems. And again, we had some new systems we brought on, like PBN, security declarations, with the new systems being involved, and we had to adapt to them. Meanwhile, some of the systems that were being given were collapsing, you know, we're locking up and breaking down on a regular basis. So it was a very, very challenging time for people just coming out of COVID, into Brexit, back into COVID. It's been a tough time for a lot of the haulage industry. But again, the haulage industry is a resilient business. You know, we're fairly articulate. We know we move around. We have these assets that we can move around. We're mobile, so we act quickly to things. I think COVID and Brexit demonstrated to a lot of people that the haulage industry is a vital part of the Irish economy. And the previous two speakers, I think, have demonstrated that very well. Going forward, what happens with Brexit? We're getting there. Certainly, it's getting a lot better. I think the TSS system we have in Northern Ireland is a huge problem for us still. The TSS system, just explained to you, is traffic coming from mainland UK to transit to Republic into Northern Ireland. It's not really working very well. We have to present the goods at TSS points, either in Belfast or Dublin Port or Warren Point. And that's affecting our operation and what's going on in our efficiencies. So hopefully that will be sorted in the next couple of months, but that is a problem at the moment, and it is causing big problems for us. In the 10-year strategy, we talk, you know, a part of it is about, you know, the labour, bringing in, you know, the 10-year, bringing people into logistics and haulage. If there's one thing we've learned from Brexit and COVID, we need to train up people now. We need to get people into haulage and train them properly. Next point will be making the roads cleaner. Again, it was interesting listening to Mark there, you know, as well about, you know, the green and so forth, about what goes on. I'm not a big lover of the whole, you know, I suppose we will only deal with what comes in front of us. We talk about gas trucks, we talk about electric trucks. They're miles away, they're years away, a long, long time before we're going to see any of them in Ireland. But a lot of work has been done by the haulage industry right now on eco-driving. We have eco-driving in our trucks. It's not easy, I'll be straight with you. You're training drivers to be effectively robots. Most of these drivers are men in their late 40s, early 50s, who have a driving style that now we have to retrain them to drive like robots. Cruise control, harsh braking, you know, there's loads of stuff there they have to do. And we try and incentivize that, but it can be difficult to get drivers to do eco-driving, but it's a huge benefit. And it's probably the biggest, you know, tool in our toolbox right now to get it, you know, to make the trucks greener and make them better. A driver can be stuck on the M50 doing eco-driving. Straight away, you know, that's going to affect the carbon emissions on the truck. The trucks are AdBlue, they're better now. So there's a lot being done by the haulage industry to make sure that, you know, we're doing our bit to be greener. The problem we have is with the carbon trucks, with the gas trucks now, with electric trucks, customers won't pay any more to bring them into their premises because we know the costs, you know, are prohibitive. So right now, I think the best tool we can use really is to get out there now, do the eco driving, give the drivers good training, but also maybe help the drivers. You know, drivers stuck at loading bays or stuck on motorways, stuck at ports, burning diesel, burning tacos. That's not helping the environment. Those things need to be looked at. We've actually got a check this week from Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland for some of the work we're doing. So there's good money there, you know, and there's good resources there to be given to us if you buy into it. On making the road safer, I think the eco driving helps that, because you do drive, you know, you use the lane assist, you use the you know, the cruise control, you use all those things, you drive slower, you cut down. That would certainly help going forward. I always look and I smile this time of year and I see the hay flying around the roads. You know, the 4.65 meters, it doesn't seem to be you know, the rule when it comes to moving some of the straw and hay around Ireland. You know, I think a little bit of enforcement is needed on, certainly on some people out there, some of the haulage industry, a little bit more enforcement on heights and weights and so forth. One of the big things I've seen in safety on the road certainly is the cameras. Most hauliers now have cameras fitted to their trucks. They're a huge addition to any transport fleet. If you crash or you do damage to a third party, you hold your hand up and it's sorted out very quickly. Equally, we've been involved in some very, very serious crashes in the last couple of years. Not our fault. Cars have gone straight into us, vans have gone straight into us. Very sad scenes. But the Gardaí have access to the cameras. They can see exactly what's after happening. Straight away, there's closure. We know what happened there. The drivers know they have cameras. They're driving safer because they know we can see what's going on. So I think from going forward, if we can, I don't know if the manufacturers are going to do it. I haven't seen a manufacturer come up yet with it. But would they actually, you know, factory fit cameras onto trucks? It'll be a huge safety aspect, I think. It certainly has made a big difference to our business in relation to insurance and bringing closure to claims, and also helping the authorities in some of the issues that they've had to come and talk to us about. On the, you know, the road transport and mobility package, it's an interesting one. It's we have trucks based out in Europe as well. We own a transport company in Poland. And the ironical thing about Poland is everyone thinks that every truck in Poland is driven by a Polish driver. They're not. In fact, I would say, looking at the stats earlier on, there's a lot less Polish drivers driving trucks now. Most Polish fleets are driven by Belarus and Ukrainians. And I can never pronounce his name, but Mr. Lesichenko has stopped that now. So a lot of the Belarus drivers can't actually get into Poland to drive Polish trucks. And that's creating a vacuum out there as well. It's a big problem right now. So you have a situation where you have one of the biggest trucking fleets in Europe is now also starting to struggle to get drivers. We are doing our very best to get drivers into our company. We're bringing a lot of drivers in from South Africa and places like that. It's working very well. But again, there is an issue there. In relation to mobility package, the new rule 107/2009, where you have to get the trucks back to the country, the member state every 8 months, every 8 weeks, is going to be a big problem. Most transport companies, all transport companies, should never have a problem in relation to legislation. That's our job. We have to be safe. We have to look after the drivers. But I think this might be a step too far, getting trucks to go back to their country of origin every 8 weeks. I don't know how it's going to work. As I said a minute ago, 15% I think of the European fleet is Polish trucks. How are they all going to get backloads into Poland every 8 weeks? I physically can't see it happening. It's just not going to work. And I think we are over, you know, legislated, and maybe we need to look at that a little bit and work a bit more to transport companies. In relation to road, you know, infrastructure and usage, I have to say roads are far better than they were 30 years ago. I live in Waterford. I travel to Wexford every day. I come across the new Ross bypass, fantastic. You come down the N11, past Enniscorthy, fantastic. Drivers aren't burning tacos anymore. They have a better quality life. They're getting home in the evenings. So for us in the haulage industry, any bit of road infrastructure, new roads, new tunnels, better lay-bys, better facilities for drivers will help our job. It makes our job easier. It helps us to be more efficient. It helps us to save costs. It helps us to attract drivers into the business. That's what it does. suppose the big one is the labour market skills. Everyone's talking about, how do we get drivers into trucks? This has been coming at us for a long, long time. And we've been speaking about it for years and years. We always knew we were going to go at a cliff edge. I would say right now it's the single biggest issue in transport. It's really a national emergency, to be totally frank with you. We are so busy right now in the haulage industry. We are turning down work. That means there's goods being left at factory gates. We can't get them off, collected to get them out to the UK and Europe. It means we can't get deliveries done, which is impacting on businesses as well. And it was interesting listening about the just-in-time was always the big buzzword a couple of years ago. And some of the multiples don't help us here. They need to stand up and take a good look at themselves. Having drivers at loading bays at 12 o'clock at night time to offload pallets themselves and then sit them there for 4 or 5 hours and not give back their paperwork, that's not going to attract drivers into this business. It's just not going to attract anybody. So we need a buy-in from a lot of the manufacturing and also the retail as well. What can they do to help us? Because if we're going to attract drivers into this business, we're going to have to explain to them, you've got a good truck, you're going to get a good salary, you're going to get a good work lifestyle out of it. We're going to respect you and look after you. But it needs a buy-in from all the pillars that are involved there. As I said here on, we've started bringing in South African drivers. It's the only source of drivers for us at the moment. They speak English, they drive on the same side of the road. It's expensive to do it, but it's the right way to do it. I think we'll need to go and do some more training in the schools. We need to capture the kids maybe at, in TY year and in secondary school. Don't wait till they're in third year or in third level with a degree in their back pocket. I would say, go back to where it was in the ESB and, bus airing years ago. Get the apprentices going and get the kids into school as quick as we can. Integrated planning and, multimodal. Look, we're too small a nation for a lot of that. We'll do our very best. We demonstrated through Brexit that we can actually get trucks and trailers out to Europe on direct ferries. I think we've all done a very good job. My last thing I'll say, because I know I can see Owen in front of me there now, is basically just look, in transport, we're solutions providers. Use it with catchphrase. We say what we say what we see. I think transport and haulage needs to be at the top table and needs to be brought in emergency situations or be at the discussion in any of the big new infrastructure or projects that go on in Ireland. And lastly, the drivers, it's the single biggest issue. I think we all need to work together to try to get more Irish truck drivers as we can into Irish trucks. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris, for that valuable insight from your own industry perspective and experience there. We might just take one question. I think it was Aidan Flynn posted to Mark, but I think it's relevant to your discussion as well, really around the attractiveness or unattractiveness to drivers. And do you think there is a problem with social compliance and terms and conditions for drivers? Or is it a bigger issue? Or is that part of the puzzle?
I think I don't think there's a big issue with compliance. I think the problem is that most reputable transport companies will always be compliant, okay? That's the job. And safety and compliance is huge. We will always do that. I think the job is not attractive to anybody anymore. Years ago, truck drivers, their dad was a truck driver or they had a farm and they went part-time driving. Unfortunately, that's not there anymore. So I think it's trying to get young men and women to explain to them that these machines are, they're €100,000 piece of machinery that you're going to have. It's an automatic truck. We're going to pay you well. You're going to drive 45 hours a week. I think we need to sell it better. I think we need to work. But again, you can't have truck drivers lined up at ports either, waiting, queuing to get into ports. That doesn't help us at all. It doesn't help that we're at loading bays queuing. So there's probably, I think from the haulage industry, I think we can do a lot more, certainly. I think we are doing very well. But I think some of the, our customers and maybe some of the ports and things like that could probably help us a little bit better. And that might attract more people into it, because they all hear about the bad stories. A trucker's life, everybody knows a trucker's life is a hard life. But I think, there needs to be a little bit more cooperation between everybody to make this job, a little bit more attractive.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. We're running out of time, so we'll move along, but thanks again. So our next presenter is Professor Brian O'Gallagher, Professor of Energy Engineering at University College Cork and Director of MARI. Presentation title is Decarbonization, Opportunities and Challenges for the Road Haulage Sector. So if I can ask you, Brian, if you are presenting slides, could you possibly you're sharing your screen? Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Owen. I'm delighted to be here, and I Can you hear me actually?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can.
Okay, apologies. Okay, there's a lot of challenges have come up this morning for the road haulage sector. I'm going to focus just on one, the decarbonisation challenge and the opportunities associated with that. And this is based on some joint work I've done with my colleague Shane McDonough. And as you mentioned, I'm from MARI, which is the Science Foundation Ireland Research Centre for Energy, Climate and Marine, who did this work. Okay, we've done a lot of work previously on freight decarbonisation, and that's summarised here. And the reason for showing this slide is really because when these slides are shared with people, if there's any interest in any of these papers that we've done, I'm very happy to share them with the participants attending here. I will draw attention to the one on the left-hand side. We did some collaborative work with the International Energy Agency in 2019, focusing on the future of trucks. And that was in the context of the future of trucks in the context of the environmental challenge of emissions reduction. So it ties in nicely with the discussion I'm going to give today. But the discussion today will focus on some work we've been doing on Ireland rather than an international perspective. So this work that I'm going to present is based on a project that we're just completing now that has been supported by Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland and the Department of Transport. And I'd like to thank the Department of Transport for your contribution, your funding support for this. And as you can see, I'm not going to go through the detail there, but that gives an outline of what we tried to do, which was to move from a baseline to looking at best practice, and in particular to model measures in Ireland associated with emissions reductions. And then in parallel then to consult with industry and to identify some potential key interventions then to inform policy decisions. So we started with some of the context, and some of this aligns well with what's come up before. The importance of the freight sector is very significant. However, it's also a large and growing source of emissions, both of carbon dioxide, which contributes to climate change, but also NOx emissions, which contributes to air pollution. Newer vehicles are cleaner and more fuel efficient, and this point has been made already before. However, the Irish HGV market is dominated by used imports, and as also has come up, the impact of Brexit is uncertain on a lot of things, but also on the importation of these second-hand trucks. There are also significant barriers to investment in new technology and more broadly to mitigation measures due to the topics identified there that have also come up earlier today. And to date, if we look across the different activities that have the policy measures that have been used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the Biofuel Obligation scheme has been responsible for the most significant reductions. And part of that is because it's effectively invisible in many ways to truck drivers, in the sense that as they have refueled their trucks, their diesel trucks with diesel over the last number of years, over that time frame, increasing amounts of biodiesel has been seamlessly blended with the diesel. So effectively, there's an increasing amount of renewable energy being used in the diesel mix, and that has caused the most significant CO2 emissions reductions in freight in the last while. Another part of the context is when we look at the government ambition on greenhouse gas emissions. Now, this is not freight specifically, this is Ireland's total greenhouse gas emissions, so across electricity, industry, agriculture, all the different sectors of the economy, including transport. And we can see in the blue line there, the total greenhouse gas emissions increased associated with the Celtic Tiger period, and then reduced associated with the recession, and more recently reduced associated with the COVID pandemic. But the challenge is that we're currently legislating legislating for a 51% emissions reduction by 2030 and to achieve zero emissions by 2050. And this was highlighted this morning by Minister Naughton. So it's a very challenging policy context that faces the whole of the Irish economy, including the freight sector. Now, if we look at some of the makeup of the current freight sector, we see where some of the challenges lie, particularly if you see that the vast majority of Irish hauliers, this is quite different to other jurisdictions, the vast majority of hauliers have a very small number of vehicles. And this is one of the challenges in terms of transitioning to new vehicles. And again, this has come up already. If we look at the vehicles that are used in the HGV sector by fuel type, most of them are, and this is the trend since 2013 up to 2020, the CNG is actually on the top, but you can't see it because it's so small. So effectively what you're seeing here are different diesel trucks of different vintages, which align with different Euro standards. And these Euro standards have increased stringently over time in terms of NOx emissions reductions in particular, but also at times improvements in CO2 emissions performance also. So we have a fleet that's dominated by diesel, but it's also dominated significantly by, there are a large number of Euro 6, but there's a residual stock. Nearly half the stock is previous vintages of Euro class vehicles. So wouldn't be as well performing in terms of emissions reductions. Another trend that we've seen in the last while is if we look at the freight trends by weight of vehicle. And we can see that relative to, this is the share of the fleet in 2013 and in 2020. And relative to 2013, the larger vans, so relatively small weight vehicles, and the relatively high weight vehicles are the ones that have increased their share over that period since 2013. Whereas in all other classes, they've reduced their share. So building on that starting point then, this is a projection in terms of the freight activity that we envisage over the period to 2035 in this instance. And effectively, what you can see here is the ton kilometers grouped by the different weight class of vehicles. And in most cases, we see growth, apart from in the very large vehicles where it tends to got this combination of reducing and increasing. And this is based on what's happening in the economy. So this is translating projections in terms of what's happening in the economy, in terms of the production and consumption of goods, and how that then impacts on the freight sector. Now, one thing to clarify is that we know that this is wrong. All projections are wrong, but it does give a useful insight into how currently we see things based on current knowledge. And building on that then, in terms of the increase in the freight activity, we can translate that then into growth in terms of numbers of trucks required, according again to the different vehicle classes. And again, as I say, we see this trend where we have the higher trucks, the largest trucks and the smallest trucks are the ones that are set to grow over the period. So in terms of decarbonisation, we identified that there's a number of measures that have come up today, and these are the three that we isolated for modelling because they were the three that we thought would have the most significant impact on emissions reduction. So eco-driver training, which has come up before, and this can deliver an average of a 10% fuel saving, as has been mentioned, but an accelerated rollout could achieve an additional savings of CO2 emissions. Now, this is not in a particular year. This is over the period, the 10-year period, 2021 to 2030. And that's important. I'll come back to that shortly. The second one then is increased biofuel obligation. And we could increase it to 20%. Currently, the trajectory is to increase it to 10%, but that could be increased further, and that would reduce emissions relative to a base case of 3.5 million tonnes, again, over the period. Now, there are different choices in terms of the biofuels. It can be biodiesel, hydrotreated vegetable oil, or renewable diesel, or biomethane. Sorry, that's a misspelling there. Biodiesel is what we currently use. Hydrotreated vegetable oil is what they use extensively in Sweden, and that allows us to go beyond the any concerns that trucks might have in terms of the share of biodiesel. So HVO is also referred to as renewable diesel, but what the truck sees is diesel rather than biodiesel in that instance. So there's you can blend up to 100% in that instance. And biomethane, as has been mentioned, requires a change in vehicles and also refueling infrastructure. That has been rolled out, but that hasn't achieved the pace that was maybe planned a couple of years ago. And then the fleet turnover incentives. This could be used to accelerate the transition to Euro 6. This would impact more on the air pollution rather than the climate, but it's also one that we've modelled. And here's the results then in terms of what we see. So this is expressed in terms of thousands of tons of carbon dioxide. And we have a business as usual scenario, which does include some of the measures already foreseen, like some aspects of eco-driving, etc., some elements of biofuel growth. But the acceleration of those is what is tracked in this, what's called all high scenario, and the orange line. And as you can see, we end up achieving this emissions reduction over the period. And but the other thing to bear in mind is that 2030 levels are higher than 2020 levels. So we don't see a reduction in emissions. We do see a reduction in emissions relative to what it would otherwise be. And with NOx emissions, we're already projecting a reduction in that as we have this kind of natural transference of the vehicle fleet that I showed earlier towards Euro 6 continuing, but that can be accelerated through this incentivized changeover. And as I say, that would impact on NOx emissions, as you can see here, but not so much on CO2 emissions. Now, the important thing to bear in mind is, as I mentioned, while we reduce emissions in heavy goods vehicles relative to what's projected, we're not seeing a reduction relative to 2018. And what I'm showing here is not freight transport on its own. It's all greenhouse gas emissions associated with transport. So it includes, in particular, car transport. It doesn't include international aviation, because this is just the emissions associated with what the transport within Ireland. And you can see we have actual emissions in 2018. There is expected to be activity growth in the period to 2030. And I show that in the context of freight, but also in car transport. And then we have a number of measures that were in the Climate Action Plan 2019. And we've kind of done our own calculations on some of those, such as the EVs for passenger cars, some electric vans, and increasing the biofuels to B12, so 12% biofuel blend. And as you may recall, what I suggested earlier was it could go up to 20, it could go up higher, but each of these things has a cost associated with it. And then there's other measures in the Carbon Action Plan, such as carbon tax and other things, efficiency supports, which would likely have more impact on the car fleet. And what this leaves then is, if we're talking about a 51% reduction relative to 2018, what this leaves is a gap of 1.5 million tonnes in 2030 to achieve that overall target. And you can see the detail of this in a submission that was published in the recently published Joint Oireachtas Committee report. And when we pull out those additional measures, I've highlighted the ones here in red that relate to freight, and this draws on the analysis that I pointed to earlier, where we have this blending of biodiesel and the incentivized driver training. And there's a couple of other measures in there as well. So just to refer back to what we need to bridge the gap is 1.4 million tonnes. And what's suggested here is that the emissions avoided could be the 20% increase of HVO. So using that, in addition to the biodiesel, using hydrotreated vegetable oil, if that displaces 20% of diesel on the road transport, we can achieve a 1.3 million tonne savings. And the incentivized driver training is also very important, not as significant in terms of quantity. So at that, I'll leave it. There's more detail available in that Oireachtas committee report. And also we have more detail emerging in the report when SEAI publish it shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks very much for that. Again, just conscious of time, we did get a question about e-commerce, and maybe this is something we'll come back to as well for our final presentation, but maybe your view on it just quickly. As e-commerce and home deliveries continue to grow, how can this aspect be decarbonised efficiently, but also economically?
Well, it's a great question. I think certainly the measures I mentioned in terms of if we change the fuels away from diesel to increasing the amount of biodiesel or incorporating hydrotreated vegetable oil to displace the diesel, that's one way of doing it. Electric vans are another way. I didn't talk about electrification because, and this has been mentioned already as well, electrification of heavy goods vehicles is a bit removed from the electrification of some of the smaller vans. So this will depend on the scale of the vehicle being used to transport the goods, as you say. Transportation, what we've seen over the last while with the pandemic has been that transportation has reduced significantly. And it's envisaged then that remote working, moving into a post-pandemic world, there's an increase in you'd have remote working associated with commuting, if you like. But as you say, as you correctly point out, with home deliveries, there may indeed be an increase, and that would be something that we would have to watch for.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Brian. Thank you for your presentation and for answering the questions. We'll move swiftly along, conscious of time. Our next presenter is Helen Hughes, Director of Professional Services at Transport Infrastructure Ireland. The presentation title is Overview from Transport Infrastructure Ireland on Recent Developments, Road Freight Data, Service Areas, Distribution Centres and Planning Matters. I can actually see your presentation, but also just to point out, Helen, we can see your notes as well. I don't think it's actually necessarily in slide 2, just to let you know, in case you might be happy to go ahead with that if you like, or if you want.
Okay. Yeah. No, I don't know how to take them off, so I'm happy for people to see my notes.
Okay. Thank you.
So thanks everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for inviting me to the conference. I've enjoyed it so far. I'm just going to cover a sort of disparate range of topics. Just a little bit of update on freight movements on the National Road Network, our service area policy and its imminent update, and just to give a sense of what is the current provision of motorway services areas in 2021, reiterating the importance of the Dublin Tunnel for freight, and some planning, just to give you an update on the amount of planning applications and planning for distribution centres adjacent to the National Road Network. So first of all, the National Road Network carries about 5% of the road network, but carries over 40% of the traffic. And as Mark from IRU mentioned earlier, Ireland is unique having such a dependence on road transport for freight of 99% of all freight on the road network. TII has recently published its National Road Indicators for 2020. And during last year, 2020, we saw an average 30 to 40% reduction of vehicle kilometres on the National Road Network. But in relation to freight, we only saw a 4% reduction, just showing the resilience of freight and the lack of COVID impact, more or less, on freight. Also on this map, we have a network of traffic counters all over Ireland, about 400 traffic counters on the National Road Network. So we publish these indicators, and you can see that the 10T network is the darker colours there have the highest freight volume. So linking into the 10T network, so you've got the M1, the M7, and the M8 Cork. They're the highest traffic volume of freight. That's just freight movements on that map. So we went out of public consultation a while ago on our service area policy, asking the public, did they think there was adequate provision of service areas? What was the standard like for meeting customer needs, including the needs of commercial drivers? And was there enough signage and enough awareness of the service area provision? And mentioning just the policy context, there's a lot of regulation in this space. Obviously, the Trans-European Network sets guidelines on what the minimum requirements for service area provision would be on the 10T network, and makes it particularly the core network, which is the M1, M7, M8 in Ireland. Then, of course, you've got the driving time rest period regulations. ITS directive is looking at providing safe and secure parking for commercial vehicles. The Road Infrastructure Safety Management Directive says when you're designing a road, you must take into account the needs of all road users, including commercial vehicles, drivers. The Road Safety Strategy had a target of delivering 5 new motorway service areas by 2020. In fact, we've well exceeded that, as I'll show you later. And the planning associated with motorway service areas is outlined in the Government's Spatial Planning and National Road Guidelines 2012. So the 10T regulations said that there should be adequate, appropriate parking spaces for commercial users, offering an appropriate level of safety and security. And they said that on motorways, at least the minimum distance you should have a motorway service area is 100 kilometres, but it's up to each member state to work out what are the needs of their society, given the prevailing conditions in that country. So just back in 2014, we published a policy, and the situation back in 2014 was we had 3 TII, or NRA at the time, delivered service areas, 2 on the M1 and 1 on the M4 in Enfield. And there was 1 at Mayfield and 1 at Moneygall, which we deemed were providing sufficient services for commercial vehicles and road users. And now in 2021, we've a much bigger density of motorway service areas, averaging 50 to 60 kilometres. You'll find a service area every 50 to 60 kilometres on most routes, and I'll go into the gaps later. So now there's 6 TII service areas on the M1, M4, M9, M11, and M6. And there's 12 private, good quality private facilities that are servicing the need of road users. And we're delighted to see that the private sector has filled in and addressed the need there. So the difference is that the TII service areas operated by TII are online, and the ones shown in orange there are just very close to the motorway junction, generally within 500 metres of the top of the slip ramp from a motorway junction. So we're happy with the level of provision on most roads, and it's well in advance of the 100 kilometre minimum outlined by the TEN-T. So TII provides signage for the private service areas that are close to the motorway, that are open 24-hour and have enough facilities and good quality facilities and clean facilities, enough food offering and different services that you would expect. So they have to be close to the motorway junction, because we don't want people diverting far off the motorway. So what are the gaps in provision? The M18 at the moment, we're there is a gap in provision between Limerick and Galway, and I know there's some private planning applications in at the moment. We will be designing in line with the RISM directive. When you're designing a new scheme, you will provide for the service area as part of that scheme. So the future M20 a service area will be looked at being provided as part of that project. And we also have a gap on the M3. So there are a few gaps which we hope will be addressed by the private sector on the M3 and M18. So just to reiterate, moving on to topic, really the importance of Dublin Tunnel for freight. And the Dublin Tunnel, it used to be called the Dublin Port Tunnel, but now it's really was designed, it's toll-free for heavy goods vehicles. So you've got about 9,000 heavy goods vehicles, 9 to 10,000 at the moment going through the tunnel every day, and they're toll-free, and that represents about 40% of all the traffic going into the tunnel. The tunnel is critical for Dublin, and especially as 85%, I understand, of all goods are transported via Dublin Port. So it's a really key bit of infrastructure. And, you know, if the tunnel isn't operating, you can see that it's a huge impact on the port, the airport, and the city in itself. So as we put in place a few measures for Brexit resilience measures, so we've added on new parking for approximately 70 heavy goods parking spaces on the M1 at Lusk, TII service areas, so that trucks can park at night safely and waiting for their ferry in the morning. The DAA Blue Holiday Park parking space in the airport has there's a parking facility there to accommodate 250 heavy goods vehicles in case there's any congestion at the port. We partnered with DAA there very successfully, and it was great. And then we have some just different traffic management measures arranged with Dublin Port down at the port to if there's any congestion. So just then moving on to road haulage and logistics. I think the first one that we were aware of was the An Post distribution centre near Portlaoise. But in the last 10 years, we've really got a lot of planning applications and a lot of development where warehousing and logistics centres are locating outside of the urban areas in proximity to national road junctions. And particularly the M2 seems to be a big hub of distribution centres, and the M7 close to Newbridge and Naas, and the N20 in Cork. So a lot of developments there. There's just an example. The Inland Port Dublin Port has bought land off the M2, 44 hectares. And I suppose this reflects the change we understand from Dublin Port, that a lot of the traffic now is containerised. So they're having less and less drivers rolling on and rolling off, or I don't know exactly the technical term, but there's more containerised, unaccompanied goods being transported that way without being accompanied by a driver. So that's a trend that is requiring more land availability. So Dublin Port have developed that port there. There is Vantage Business Park. It's a recently granted business park at Coldwaters, focusing on warehousing and delivery. Palace Foods and Cisco's food distribution, Aldi distribution centre off the Newhall interchange near, I think it's between Naas and Newbridge, and the DSV is, I think it's Pennies. So a lot of these are all close to motorway junctions, and then down in Charleville, the N20, the Lidl distribution centre. So these are just some examples. You've got the Inland Port, Cisco, and you know, you can see, I know the diagrams are very small, but the Cisco, you've got all these pallets, and then you've got these truck sort of boarding areas where they can just back in and then get loaded. So, and then the M7, Aldi and DSV, and the N20 in Charleville. So there's just a few examples of just different topics, which TII is involved in. I think we often talk about our customers, and you need never set your foot on a national road or set your car on a national road, and yet be a customer of the national road network, because we all rely on the distribution of goods and services through the national road network. So it's key for the economy and for Ireland. So thanks very much. That's my last slide. Oh, that's the little one in Cork. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Helen. Thanks for that presentation. We just have one question, which is in relation to the Dublin Tunnel. Why isn't the free toll for HGVs requiring all trucks to stop, thus increasing fuel usage by an average of 1.5 litres? So asking about the free, like an e-toll, I suppose, similar to M50.
Yes, yeah. Well, that is something we could look at, but it really depends on the receiving network. So the receiving network at Dublin Port and down at the East Wall Road and all that area, it actually wouldn't, the receiving road network wouldn't be able to handle free flow. Also, there's no tunnel, there's no storage allowed in the tunnel. So trucks can't, if there's any congestion at the toll booths, we meter the tunnels at the northbound portal, the southbound portal, at the north of the tunnel. We have to meter tunnels, so meter HGVs. But I think it's really to do with the receiving network. It's not like another location. We'd be all into free flow if it would work there.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Helen. Thank you for your answer to the question and your presentation. We'll move along to our next presenter. So presenting next, we have Sabrina Zhang from TU Dublin and Dr. Nicholas Valentassis, also from TU Dublin, presenting urban logistics and decarbonisation.
Hi, hello everyone. Yeah, Nicholas will share the slides. Hope everyone hear me okay. Okay, so hi everybody, my name is Sabrina Zhang, and today myself and my colleague Nicholas from TU Dublin will share a bit insight for this webinar on urban logistics and also the current decarbonization practice that are already available in Ireland. So I will start off with a little bit introduction on the urban logistics concept and also the stakeholder involved and also the challenges. So first of all, urban logistics is, as we know, is also known as a city logistics or urban freight transport. And sometimes a buzzword probably first come to our mind is the last mile delivery. But however, we need to be mindful that urban logistics is more than just the last mile. It also includes the last 50 miles and last mile, and also the last 50 feet. Usually it's delivered by porter on foot or being collected by the consumer directly. So if we see a diagram on the right part of this slide in a second, so imagine the circle is the boundary of our city, and outside the city center in the suburban areas, actually we got the external zones such as the ports and also the distribution centers. And the deliver in the suburban areas usually are made by heavy goods vehicles. And inside the circle here, in city center or urban areas, usually we got the satellite facilities, such as the urban consolidation centers or local depots. And those deliver are usually made by light goods vehicles, and nowadays cargo bikes or etc. So if we move on to the next slide, please. We also need to be mindful of what activities in urban logistics. If we look at from a supply chain perspective, so this diagram actually map out all the global supply chain from upstream to downstream. So actually urban logistics, the activity including are more focused on the downstream of the supply chain, usually are closer to the consumers. For example, by definition, urban logistics are including the activities such as retail logistics, construction logistics, recycle, waste management, and also a tricky one is the shopping trips made by private household. However, there is a criteria, is that all these activities has to be made by heavy goods vehicles or light LGVs as well. So private passenger cars are not counted in the definition here. Okay, we can move on to the next slides. So one striking difference actually between urban logistics and the logistics in traditional sense is the stakeholders that are included. So the various stakeholders from both public and private sectors involved along the supply chain actually formed a vibrant and also complex network for urban logistics. And here on the public side, we need to stress the local authority actually have a key role in this urban logistics ecosystem. And in the private sector, the freight operators today is our HGV, LGV operators, and also the consumer who drive the demand for the home delivery is also plays a quite important role in urban logistics. So why it's urban logistics is in European cities, generally research find it's difficult to organize, to modernize, and now to decarbonize. It's because there is a little shared interest of any given policy matters among stakeholders. And also the next one, there is a little cooperations or interactions between different stakeholders. Also, one of the key findings is that the local authorities sometimes lack of awareness, knowledge, and also the data insight into what's happening in the freight side in our cities. So the next slide. So the urban logistics challenges on the left-hand side here, we see from a public stakeholder perspective, and we probably quite familiar with those challenges on the news and on the articles. We see the logistics has impact in our streetscape and create congestions and air quality impact, and also the road safety issues as well. And however, there is also the other side of the story, which is the challenges that facing our logistics service providers and also the carriers in the city. So we can click through the slides. So our cities are, especially the historical European cities, our cities are not optimized, designed to cope with all these new logistics demands, such as a limited parking space, tight delivery windows, and also traffic condition as well. And also there is a lack of policy support for freight operating in the city. And usually the land and transport planning are largely prioritized passengers transport over freight transport. And also the our operators also facing strict restrictions on access regulations and also vehicle regulations to the city. And there is a common shared challenges on both sides, which is the data availability issues, and has been mentioned by previous presenters as well today. So I would like to maybe share the next slides. This is my ongoing research at TU Dublin. So what data we need to capture the sustainability performance in city logistics? So over the years, we see many governmental measures, initiatives has been carried out in cities and in Europe around the world. However, there is yet to establish the consensus among stakeholders upon the perceptions and the principles of sustainability in city logistic context. And also there is so far there is no standardized framework to capture the sustainability from both side stakeholder perspective. So today I won't go into detail on each indicators, but I would like to probably stress one key message is in order to improve the data availability and also the quality, we need a contribution from both sides of the stakeholders. And especially we need to encourage the industry players, their willingness to share more data. And we still need to find a way to mechanism to encourage those collaboratively reporting. Okay, now I will give the floor to Nicholas to present you some decarbonization practice now in Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So in this second part of the presentation, we review some initiatives for the decarbonization of city logistics that are implemented in Ireland. These initiatives can be associated with two of the 5 pillars of the roadmap put forward by Alice for decarbonizing freight transport and logistics. Each pillar refers to different types of initiatives, and today we will examine initiatives that are associated with the two highlighted pillars of smartly used and combined transport modes and use of lowest emission energy source for fleets and assets. So the first initiative that we're going to look here is the example of DPD Ireland, which in 2019 launched what they called Electricity, which is Ireland's first electric parcel delivery depot in East Wall in Dublin. They were providing emission-free last mile delivery for Dublin city centre using some smaller vehicles that look like the golf carts that we see here on the slide, and also some electric vans. This initiative allowed them to report in 2020 a reduction of CO2 emissions equal to 30 tons in comparison with the previous year. Additionally, in 2020, they launched a scheme to deliver 1,000 parcels per day in towns in County Meath and County Louth, using one double-decker bus as a hub and 10 e-bikes for deliveries, replacing 10 diesel vans and saving us at full capacity up to 550 kilos of CO2 emissions each week. A second example here is this one of Unpost, who in terms of cutting emissions from urban logistics, they initially rolled out 200 electric vehicles in Dublin as part of their Unpost Eco Plan, replacing diesel-fueled vehicles for deliveries between the two canals of Dublin. Ever since, they have extended their zero-emission deliveries to city centres in Waterford, Kilkenny, Cork, Limerick and Galway, making a significant progress towards their commitment that all of their city fleets will have zero-emission vehicles by 2021. They have over 1,000 electric vans and over 100 electric trikes, and they plan for a full electric vehicle fleet by 2030. They also joined the global EV100 to accelerate next-generation electric vehicles, and they also aim to find replacements for their heavy goods vehicles fleet. A third example is the one that in the late 2018, Dublin City Council, in collaboration with Belfast City Council, they launched the Last Mile Delivery Challenge as part of their Small Business Innovation Research Program. One initiative that successfully secured phase 1 funding was the collaboration of UPS with Fernhay, which saw the use of the battery-assisted e-walker for city deliveries in areas with the highest parcel drop density. The cube that we see here with this the brown box with UPS logo on, these cube containers enable pre-sorting of packages for delivery and are, as they are quite narrow, they do not take so much space on the pavement, and they can also be rolled into the shops. They're also low enough so that they do not obstruct the view of pedestrians, cyclists, and other road users. The couriers now deliver the parcels and packets directly to the customer's door from mini urban distribution centers, such as the urban packets eco hubs that we see here on the right side of the slide, that UPS has introduced in 2 locations in Dublin Centre. And by that, they were able to remove 5 diesel vehicles from the road and allowed for less demand of curb space for deliveries. Of course, collaboration among various stakeholders was key for the implementation of these initiatives. Other couriers have also introduced cargo bikes, as we see on the left side of the slide. However, in the last year, we also saw the innovative trial of drones of the Mana Aero for food deliveries in Oromon in County Galway in collaboration with Just Eat, Ben & Jerry's, Camille and Tesco. Their drone hub can support over 100 takeaway deliveries a day among the homes of the 10,000 residents. Another interesting and relevant to the webinar today initiative is that one of Vision Green, who is another company in the race of decarbonization of deliveries. Vision Green uses 2 biomethane fueled 22-ton 30-feet heavy good vehicles for deliveries of grocery products to retailers in Dublin. Vision Green is the only company that uses clean fueled HGVs for urban logistics operations, and so far they measure 300 tons of CO2 emission reduction. However, several challenges limit the scaling up of their operations, and these challenges include the lack of awareness from the industry and also lack of policy support, including support from local government for city access permits. However, as we heard earlier on today, this year the Department of Transport has launched the Alternatively Fueled Heavy-Duty Vehicle Purchasing Grant Scheme for the operators of heavy good vehicles. The scheme is a very good initiative, but such clean technologies will require significant upfront investment costs for both the vehicles and infrastructures for charging or fueling. So unless such investments are made, the scalability to meet the true potential of carbon-friendly vehicles will not be achieved. A transition to alternative fuels, such as biofuels, is a big opportunity, as almost all heavy good vehicles in Ireland are diesel fueled, and 45% of the national's heavy good vehicles fleets are 10 years old or more, as we also heard from Chris Smith earlier this morning. So reviewing the various examples that we saw so far, we can summarize some takeaways. And of course, we do acknowledge that there are more initiatives and examples, but we couldn't possibly fit them in the presentation today. So from the initiatives we review, we firstly have found that these initiatives focus on retail urban logistics activities and mail and parcel deliveries, possibly leaving out other types of urban logistics operations that Sabrina mentioned, such as, for example, those needed for construction, supply of offices and government buildings, and many other, including also the reverse flows. Also, most initiatives focus on last mile deliveries by light good vehicles or cargo bikes in the city and are of small scale implementation, possibly with the exception of Unpost. Lastly, most of these initiatives are private initiatives of single players with limited or mediated collaboration, but we could not really find any evidence of multi-user facilities. Based on these takeaways, we were able to identify some gaps in the current practice as well as some opportunities. The first gap is that there is a need to reduce the trips of heavy good vehicles to and from the city, as the current initiatives mostly focus on last mile deliveries and light good vehicles. An opportunity to achieve a reduction of heavy good vehicles in the city center is to consider solutions for the last 50 miles instead of the last mile only. As such, thinking of urban logistics as a system of actors and facilities that goes beyond the last mile. One solution that is relevant here is the potential for an urban consolidation center in the outskirts of the city. As a concept, urban consolidation centers could solve several issues and result in environmental and social benefits from more efficient and less intrusive transport operations, among other benefits for the various actors of city logistics systems. However, the reality is more challenging due to high setup costs, operational complexities from different storage and handling requirements among products and cargo owners, potential failure to attract a sufficient number of clients, and among other challenges that are very well documented in extant literature. A review of urban consolidation practice showed that some of them are initiated by private entities, such as owners or developers of shopping malls, or for example, airports, airport operators, and other construction contractors. However, we also have urban consolidation centers that are designed to serve parts or the entirety of urban areas where there are narrow streets, historic layouts, and where possibly there's a lack of loading and unloading bays in urban areas. Such urban consolidation centers are often initiated by local authorities, and they may receive various forms of public support, such as financial, direct or indirect regulatory support. Also, some urban consolidation centers are developed not for retail purposes, but for deliveries to educational units, such as the proposed urban consolidation center in the city of Stargard in Poland, which requires the active involvement of local authorities. However, here, a key concern, again, is how to make the center economically self-sufficient after the necessary support of the authorities at the beginning of the operations. The review of the success stories of urban consolidation centers saw that, such as the one in the city of Gothenburg in Sweden, also saw that any supporting policies for urban consolidation centers should be considered together with other urban freight transport policies, which are established by the local authority, and also that retailers should be included in the planning to express the requirements they need. Of course, there are more critical success factors to be taken into consideration, but this would require a more extensive study on urban consolidation centers. Now, in addition to the previous gaps, we found that there is an opportunity to utilize learnings and change management approaches for the replacement of diesel trucks by alternative type of vehicles from large operators for the smaller players. And lastly, we would also engage consumers by increasing their awareness so that they will become mindful of their purchasing behavior, including the shipping service that they can choose. You can read more about some suggestions on how to reduce our personal environmental footprint when ordering online by scanning the QR code that you see on the right side of the screen, which is a short article we wrote a couple of months back for RTE Brainstorm. Now, concluding on several points that are made throughout both parts of the presentation, we can argue that the implementation of various solutions as suggested here, such as, for example, the need for standardization of reporting, the need for data availability and accessibility, or even solutions around the development of the use of ICT and other types of physical infrastructure, such as urban consolidation centers and smart city initiatives, or even solutions around the encouragement to uptake clean fuel vehicles and solutions that will facilitate the education awareness of consumers and will benefit the soft branding of organizations, will need implicit and explicit collaboration of multiple stakeholders, as we see on the slide. So we will argue that for any of these solutions to happen, we need multi or cross-stakeholder dialogue, which should develop over time. A way forward, and this is our last slide, is that we could utilize freight partnerships, which have been shown to be an important part of addressing urban logistics and freight transport problems. I'm going to leave that here, and I would like to thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Sabrina, for your presentation. We had a question earlier on around e-commerce and delivery, home deliveries, and how can this aspect be decarbonised efficiently, but also economically. I just wondered kind of your views on that as well. I have a second question in relation to policy too, in terms of what types of policy would you like to see to support this element in terms of urban logistics and e-commerce decarbonisation?
Yeah, I think maybe on Jared's question, how do we decarbonize the increasing demand for home delivery? I think that's probably concerned about the last mile delivery. And we already have those, just as we showed the example, those measures by the courier companies. And however, we as the majority of consumer, like you and me, maybe we can be mindful of our purchase choice when we make our purchase online purchase order. You know, we can direct our parcel to the local depot and then work to collect the parcel by yourself. Try to also plan the time ahead. I think those are from our side, but that's my answer. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Sabrina. You mentioned about a gap in terms of freight policy. I'm just thinking then, you know, what type of policy would you like to see, or what policy would you think help to address some of these potential issues?
I think one of the key issues is the transport planning in our city, because sometimes we need to factor in the freight operation in our city. Nowadays, of course, we prioritize the active travel, and also we need to factor in, you know, how do we provide more charging points to providing all these clean technology or vehicles.
Okay, thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, Nicholas, for your presentation there. Okay, so we're approaching towards the end of our webinar. So at the moment, I just want to remind you of a couple of brief points, and then Ray O'Leary is going to come in and maybe address one of the questions in relation to electrical infrastructure, and a bit of a wrap up also. But yes, I'd like to thank very much to presenters, and also thank very much the participants for your questions, and hopefully you found that engaging and it was stimulating. I know I certainly did, and there's definitely a lot of issues to consider going forward to maintain, I suppose, a efficient, effective, and also to address the decarbonisation agenda, not only in terms of haulage and road freight and logistics, but also for the support of the broader economic development for the island of Ireland. There are a number of little points just to make. I know we didn't get through all of the questions, so we will follow up on them and come back to you in relation to those. Just a reminder, you will be circulated a summary report, and the deadline of the 2nd of July is also there for the public consultation. So again, thank you. I'm going to hand over to Ray O'Leary. I think he wants to address one of the, do a wrap up, and also address one or two of the questions there. So hopefully Ray can be unmuted and be able to talk us through. Ray, I think you're there. Can you?
Yes, I think I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Excellent. I just wanted to come in a slightly unscheduled appearance. I really just wanted to say First of all, thank you to the Minister. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you for everybody for taking the time to take part in this. And I have to give a particularly effusive thank you to Claire and her team, Niall and Isabel, for the very hard work they've done to put this together. As usual, as Assistant Secretary, I will always in and try and take the credit for the people's work. They've done a fantastic job. Please forgive me, anybody. Please forgive me, anybody who's here from the Health and Safety Authority. Technically, I'm on actual annual leave today, but I don't think I'm breaching the Working Time Directive. That's also why I'm looking a bit casual. But I really just wanted to say a thank you. I think this was an excellent presentation, I have to say, and I wasn't involved in the hard work that went into it. I think one of the challenges, I just want to kind of pick up one or 2 points, which is, and I think Chris highlighted it, road transport is so integral to everything in the modern economy and society. First of all, people aren't even aware of it. It's almost like our electricity, water and comms networks, except unless that rare occasion when it doesn't work. That also presents a challenge, first of all, in making people focus on it because they take it for granted. And indeed, COVID and Brexit allow that, I think, but it's something we have to keep making the case for as partners. Secondly, I think it stresses the challenge of a road haulage strategy, which is almost where do we set our boundaries, where do we try and change the whole world? Because, and I was on that last presentation from Sabina, our partners are so widespread. The upstream commercial partners of the sector, the players in the sector, the downstream commercial partners in the sector, and of course then the various government and regulatory authorities, and indeed the international players as well. So it's a wide and diverse sector. I don't think we have time, as I say, to address all of the points. Sorry, Owen, you were going to address a particular question to me, were you there?
There was a question over electrical infrastructure to support. Will electric vehicle charging infrastructure be capable in meeting this projected increased demand? Also, what about e-scooters? How will they be legislated? Well,
first of all, on the electrical infrastructure, that's something that we are directly dealing with. Indeed, my colleagues who from the department are looking at this in cooperation with our colleagues in the department, and it's a challenge for us. It's a challenge to put the infrastructure in place. It's a challenge for us to put the infrastructure in a place that is actually takes account of the road network, because very often they use the road network, and we don't want to put a whole load of charging points in place and dig up the roads and leave our hauliers facing bad roads afterwards. So that's the kind of cross-government, cross-sectoral challenge that we are trying to work on with colleagues across government and indeed the industry stakeholders. In terms of e-scooters, we are, as I say, working on the principal legislation that would allow for the legalization of their use. And we are also working on regulatory secondary legislation that would efficiently regulate them. I think hopefully we will certainly be cognizant to ensure that they don't have a deleterious impact on the safety or operation of the freight sector as well as other road users, while at the same time allowing people the opportunity to use them. So I think that's, as always, is trying to strike the appropriate balance between the many users of our roads. So that's as I say, there's a lot of points for us to think about, and I really want to thank everybody. And the other thing, maybe turning around some of the points, we shouldn't be apologetic about the importance of this sector, about the future potential of this sector. Even when we talk about things like the recruitment challenge, yes, there are many things that are unattractive about the sector. It's a challenge, but also we shouldn't be afraid to tell young people this could be a damn good career for the future as well. And it's finding ways to articulate that and to show people a career pathway, I think, is as critical as anything else when we look to that. So thank you all for your time, and thank you for a most both enlightening and indeed entertaining morning. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Thank you, everyone. I think that's a wrap.